What's up? Edward and the SF Pro team. Here are some notes on fueling for a marathon. Great question, Edward. Let's dive in. So, in essence, this is the context, right? How much should I fuel during a marathon? I will be making a module on this ASAP, but in the meantime, I'll give you this. So, for context, Edward has recently run a sort of 6-hour, 45-minute marathon, which is about 42 Ks. And I asked him, how much fluid and, what did you consume in terms of fuel? And he said he consumed lots of water and electrolyte drinks from the stations throughout, got calf cramps and had a really painful last 7 miles, essentially, right? Very common story, especially in marathons. And pretty much the number one factor for this is fueling and getting that right. Okay, so here are the laws of fueling. Number one, train like you race. This means training on your long run. So if you're going for a long run, I describe like a long run as anything over 1 hour. Fuel as you go on those, like you would be during your race, even if it is a slow run or a recovery run. Really important, because not only is it training your gut whilst you're running, but it's also stopping the need for a greater recovery after the long run as well. So it supports both ends of the spectrum. These numbers are ideals, okay, so these are like the goal essentially of like what you really need to be doing if you're running at an elite level. Obviously the lower tolerances are probably where most people starting out with their fueling journey should be aspiring to getting there, but it takes time to train. Okay, so carbs 60 to 90 grams per hour. You can essentially consume sugar and carbohydrates in the forms of fluids, lollies, dates, fruits. You just got to look it up on the back of the packet, muesli bars, things like that. Okay, and you've got to balance these pieces out. Okay, calories about 200 to 400 per hour, sodium 6 to 800 milligrams per liter. Okay, so that's per liter of water that you consume. Fat, and you have essentially, you want to target less than 30 grams of fat per hour, so it'll lock up your stomach. I've experienced that before, so that's why that one is in there. You've probably noticed that I've left out protein. Protein during long runs, unless you're doing like a miler or something like that, the benefits whilst the body is in a race is negligible. So protein every part after or before, great, but during a race there's essentially not very much benefit in consuming protein. It's just an extra thing the body has to deal with whilst running longer. So these are upper limits that are targeted for elites essentially, but it's good to get your brain thinking in this way and start thinking about how your body processes fuel. Why? Well, your body has 2,000 calories of carbs and 70 calories of fat storage at any one time, and we will use the carbohydrates way faster than we'll use the fat stores. Okay, and so when we run hard, race pace, or pushing, right, we often slip into anaerobic, that means without oxygen metabolism, or zone 3 plus on our heart rate monitors, and the body starts to burn carbs instead of oxygen for fuel. Okay, so this storage tank of 2,000 cal of carbs usually will last about an hour and a half at moderate to hard intensity. If you don't fuel as you go, okay, so you're essentially drawing that storage tank down. This is why people hit the wall, and often especially why people hit the wall at the 30k mark in marathons. They've probably had a little bit of electrolyte drinks along the way. They've probably been hitting heaps of water, but no sodium, no carbohydrates, and so the body's just going, I'm using my 2,000 calories, poof, and then they hit rock bottom, and the body's got to slow right down to be able to process and metabolize the fat, which takes way more energy, and that's why the body starts slowing you down. Okay, it's a relatively simple equation, and it sounds quite reductionist, but it exists, right? Okay, so considering, Edward, you've got 1 week left into your marathon, this is what I'd do. Okay, so number one, that's annoying that I can't make it pretty. Let's do a little trick. Number one, ensure you're consuming 1 gel or concentrated carbohydrate source at least every 45 to 60 minutes of your current training runs in the last week. Okay, so 1 gel is about 25 to 30 grams of liquid carbohydrates. You could use soft lollies instead. It's a really good starting place, and soft lollies are about 80% per weight carbohydrates, like 80% sugar, 90% sugar, right? Just look at the back of the packet, you'll see per 100 grams, and it might say 80 grams of sugar. Okay, look at the number on the back of the packet as to how many grams of lollies you need to eat, count them out, and put them in your pocket for your next run. You could also use medjool dates. They are very high in carbohydrates, or crystallized ginger as well for a more natural option, okay? So, in essence, right, if you take carbs, all you did was just focus on just carbohydrates, right? Because with natural carbohydrates, and there'll be sodium in the lollies as well, and same with the dates and the ginger. You said 60 grams of sugar per hour. Get a packet of lollies, look at the back of the packet, and see how many per 100 grams, and then measure or count that out and know, hey, look, if I eat 8 lollies per hour, I will hit my 60 grams of carbohydrates. That's how I'd think about that. And then if you're running for 4 hours, I'd put 32 lollies in my pocket and say, I have to just keep eating these as I go, and by the time I get to the finish line, I should not have 32 lollies left in my pocket. Okay, that's the game. Race day. Obviously, if you can, take some, some soft lollies or something like that, or some gels in your pocket. That's great. And then race day, if it's a drink station, try and only have the electrolyte drink mix for as long as your body can handle it. Then switch to water if you can't handle the flavor anymore. Okay. So again, we're training our body to take on carbohydrates. The reason why they have electrolytes is just essentially salts and sugar in water so that your body can absorb the water, because they've found that your body can't absorb water without those two things, and you can't absorb those two things without water. So if you just drink only water, have no carbohydrates or no sodium sources during a run, you'll actually run the risk of dehydrating yourself, which is a wild concept, because the body actually has to find those sodium and carbohydrate sources from inside the body, and so it pulls those out of the system to try and bind the water back into the body. So energy equation goes out the wazoo. Okay, so on race day, the organisers usually mix these pretty light in terms of how much powder they put in the water to save money, but it should be at least some sodium and carbs to help you on the day. Okay, so you should be back up here. You should be able to get maybe like 300 milligrams per litre out of the weak drink mix, but it's better than nothing, okay? So it's a massive level up along the way. So those are some tips, and that's probably how I'd approach that for the last week coming into that marathon, Edward. So hope it helps. Enjoy.